This is the biggest room in the world, so welcome to the biggest room in here. This is going to be, this was a very last minute panel. I thought we needed some more video game dev related panels. This is going to be very open forum QA because I don't have anything prepared. Literally, this panel was set up on Friday. So, but we'll let everybody introduce yourself. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, folks. I jumped in at the exact last minute. He's like, hey, do you want to come and sit up at my 3 o'clock panel? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. So how y'all's MAGFest going so far? You having a good time? Thank you all for being here. This is a reschedule. So my name is Amanda Lang. I go by LitaGemini on Twitch, and this is a panel for Q&A about the game industry. I'm going to give you my bona fides. I worked at Microsoft for about almost 6 years. I was a technical evangelist / engineer, so I worked on the code side and I worked on the community side. Prior to that, my job was a community manager at Shell Game Studios, which is in Pittsburgh, PA. It's the largest game studio in Pennsylvania. And then I was also a game content manager for a smaller company called Idle Media, where we released games mostly on Facebook, which, believe it or not, was a thing about 7 years ago. So I did a lot of community management, content management, quest design for Facebook games. Probably nothing you've ever played, but and then I worked at Shell Games on one project that went into beta and never got out of beta and then was quietly canceled. And I got to do some testing on some of their other titles that you probably have played as well. So that's me. Prior to that, I was a game development teacher at a school in Detroit. And I am now back teaching. I teach at Kutztown University as a professor of game design and computer science.
I'm Brian, go by Captain Crafts. I'm also on Twitch and I do VTubing and I just dabble in everything. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice already. I've been in games for about a little over 18 years. Worked BioWare, Bethesda. I worked on like Dragon Age and Layers of Fear and Star Wars: The Old Republic, Elder Scrolls. I don't know, just a lot of games. I've worked mostly in marketing, or I was a senior marketing artist. This is my last title. I've done everything from in-game cinematics to UI design. Designed the UI for Ruby Grim Clips when I worked at Rooster Teeth. I also do a lot of marketing materials, video editing, motion graphics, stuff like that. And I've had to do a lot of hiring in the industry. A lot of real reviews, a lot of like thousands and thousands of applications and hiring. So I thought it'd be a good idea to do this panel because, you know, it's probably one of the number one questions I ever get is like, how do you get into this industry? It's so hard to get into. So, but yeah, I want to make this panel, and it's going to be pretty open forum Q&A, mostly just because I had absolutely no time to set it up. But yeah, so we're just do question and answers, and if you guys have any questions or want to hear any stories or anything, let me know. And yeah, so
I will say that I've had to give a breaking into the industry overview numerous times because of my background in teaching. So I usually preface this kind of talk by saying that there's multiple places in the game industry one can go. One can be on the development side or the production side. One can be on the hardware side or the software side. Most people have their questions about the software side. And then in the software side, you've got code, you've got audio, you've got art, and those are kind of like 3 basic areas. But then you've also got all the publishing side where you've got your marketing, you've got your promotion, HR, the basic standard jobs that any company has to have, PR. And then there's also production, which is kind of project management. Sometimes the role of a producer does vary a lot from company to company. And then in the engineering side, there's front-end engineering, back-end engineering, people who work on the code for matchmaking and networking and stuff like that on big games. And there's a rule of thumb in that the bigger the company, the work that you work for, the smaller part of the game you get to touch. So if you work for a small company, which I've generally worked for small companies, I was on a team, my first game team that I worked professionally, it was only like a 5-person team. So I was doing art, I was doing writing, I was doing testing, I was doing a lot of stuff for that title. In a larger company, it might be your job to just make the flowers, and that's it. And you're creating this one graphic art asset that's going to be used. And a lot of the big companies that do the big famous games also do a lot of outsourcing. So that's why when you watch the credits of a game, you're going to see like all these other labels of different companies that they leaned on over the course of time because they outsourced their animation to this company and they outsourced their cutscenes to this company and they outsourced their network code to this company and so forth and so on. So you're going to see, if you've ever watched the credits for a game, how many hundreds of games might roll by. And also, not everybody who works on a game gets credited in the credits because that's always a fight sometimes. So you don't even know necessarily how many people touched a game. On the other hand, on the indie side, there's effectively one-man bands who make the entire game themselves, and those people kind of have more of an auteur approach to their design. So there's a huge spectrum of how big game development gets and how big companies get. And I have worked at one of the biggest. So I know how big the bureaucracy can get when you're kind of in the muck and trying to figure out whose job it is to do what. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been at both. I've been at the small, 40 under, and I've been at the EA level, where there's so many teams and so many people in different countries, you just don't, where you answer to 76 people on every email chain, and they're all run different. Some are run where I was at a company, I was at Red 5 Studios, they were working on Firefall, and we had no producers, we had no team managers, we had the owner of the company, and he was the only one who could make any decisions on anything. It was open, everyone was at the same level, and nothing ever got done. So it didn't work, but everybody tries different things. The game industry can be very flexible. I mean, we had that place, we had our own tiki bar and bartender that could serve us drinks every day. So
that's crazy.
We had 4 kegs of beer on tap 24/7. They cycled them every week, and
wow.
Yeah, it was a little crazy. It can get, you get some long hours sometimes, and so you gotta make it fun. So if you guys have any questions at any time, feel free to ask.
Yeah, we want to make this an open chit chat because we don't have slides. So I'm curious to know if people are thinking about making their own games, and if you're trying to either break into a company or if you want to be indie, what's the vibe? Who out here has tried to make a game before? Awesome. Is anybody here making games right now? A few of you. That's awesome. So what are you making? Go start at the back. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Nice. We had another person in the back there. Yeah, you. Yeah, you said you had a game too. What are you making? Cool. I don't know. I wasn't. The lights on the stage are right in our eyes, so it makes it some kind of hard to see a little bit. So
my eyes are watering. I do a lot of video editing and stuff, and I love the dark. So this room is killing me. It's just ugh. Yeah.
Did anybody else want to talk about their project? Yeah, go ahead. Right there. So you're a writer. Editor. So you're so this is the most common question that I get. So I'm going to just use you as a piggyback just to riff a little bit. Because a lot of people ask, they're well, what I want to do is write the story of a game. So that is a job that is a narrative designer job that exists out there. Super duper hard to get. I don't know that I would start there if that was my ambition. I might find a buddy to help me write code and stuff, but it seems like that the thing that people have the strongest ambition toward is kind of being the idea guy for a video game, and I want to tell you that that's just a super rare thing to get. It's you're never going to be the idea guy. You would have to develop a second skill. I actually spoke at the GDC Narrative Summit, so I'm familiar with a lot of the narrative designers that are out there, and it's a really small field. But if you do want to get into game writing, here's some of the tips that I would make. First of all, write interactive shit. Do not just write straightforward linear stories and expect that to translate to video game. Your best bet is to make something like a visual novel using RenPy, which is a fairly easy to pick up Python engine for writing. I do think the original Doki Doki Literature Club is in RenPy, for example, so that's a good starting point for visual novels. And if you haven't played, I often use games I've played like almost every video game, so I use a lot of games as examples. So if you're not familiar with certain games, like just riff on other stuff I'll remember. There's a lot of games out there that you can like kind of see how they were made and put together and figure out like what's the best angle to attack this from. But if you are into just game writing, I highly recommend looking at the interactive fiction community. The interactive fiction community is everything from like text parser style games like Go Left, Go Right, Go North, whatever, and web browser based like point and click type games that are a little bit more text heavy, but a lot of times they have graphics as well. Something like Twine, which is an engine that I personally haven't used very much, but I play around with it a little bit, and it's like JavaScript based. So if you're into JavaScript, at any point, if you have any interest in writing your own game, like as an author, you will either have to learn to code or find a friend who knows how to code and hope that they stick to your vision. Because the chances of you like doing an entire game without any coding experience at all is, I mean, I'm speaking from the benefit and standpoint of somebody who was an engineer professionally, but the only reason I started doing coding, because my background is in art, okay? My degree is in 3D animation. But I wanted to make games, and the only way that I could do that was to learn to code. And as it turns out, like, knowing how to code was such a valuable skill that people kept asking me to do it. Because anytime I had a vision, it's way faster for me to code it myself than it was to ask somebody else to code it. And when I was lucky enough to like get on a team where I didn't have to write code anymore, it was great because I could be like, all right, this is the quest we're writing, and you do it, I'm gonna write the text, that's it. I didn't have to write any code anymore. But did knowing like what was possible in code still make that a better experience for my other developers? Absolutely. Because once you get the nitty-gritty of an interactive story and the branches that have to happen to make a story interactive, if you're going to have branches, but you don't have to, but you have to think about what kind of story you're writing. And if you're writing like a Facebook game, chances are good that story is nothing. It's like very linear. It's like, you met this raccoon, and the raccoon told you to go to this house, and you clicked on this thing, and you clicked on these other 3 things. It's very linear. But you can write stories that are branching where people don't see other aspects of it. And for a while, like that was the thing that I was the most fascinated by, right? Like, how do people write these interactive fictions that have all these choices? And when you get deep down in it, it's a lot of writing stuff that nobody's gonna see. So a really cool example is the game Disco Elysium. Has anybody played that? Yeah, so it's a very, very cool modern example of a super interactive, dense, text-heavy story. It is made with a tabletop gaming engine under the hood, so it literally rolls dice and it shows you the dice. So you make a check on whatever like speech check you're making. There's no combat in the game. It's all talking to people. There's like 1 fight, maybe 2, depending on the choices that you make. They're not very often, and it just rolls dice. But everything in the game is in text. So if you're interested in writing games, play games with a lot of writing in them and see how they're interactive. Because the key isn't just writing a story, it's writing an interactive story, and it is a different skill set.
Telltale games.
Telltale games are great for that, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they have a garbage engine, or they used to anyways. It was not a good engine. It barely ran the games they made, but their games are well written, so, and they're fun. So, not talking about the internal drama, that's a whole other story, but yeah, I mean, games is a strange industry. If anybody's ever tried to get into it, it's notoriously known to be hard to get into but easy to stay into, and it is, honestly, because most game studios are very willing to try to hire people when they get laid off or a company goes under. You know, they're like jumping at the free talent. You know, like they're like, oh, free people, we need more people, and so they love to hire and stay within. It does sometimes mean moving around. I've been in the last 15 years, I've been in 6 states. I've moved 33 times. So, yeah. And it's everything from layoffs to companies going under. I was at QC Games working on this game called Breach. And they literally just called everybody up in the middle of the day, like right in the normal day. And they're like, hey, guys, we ran out of money. We couldn't get a second project funded. We're done. It's the last day, you know?
Yeah, my project at Shell was similar. It was we were trying to figure out how to monetize this thing and couldn't quite figure that out, and then brought in a consultant, and she was like, oh, and they're like, well, we guess we don't really need this project anymore.
I mean, unfortunately, it's a fortunate side effect of any type of artistic interest, or like all the whole industry. Like there's a lot of contract work. There's a lot of even full time. I've been pretty lucky to stay full time in games most of the time, but like it can hit a ceiling, unfortunately. I worked on a lot of MMOs. There's a lot of ceilings in there, you know. Question? Sorry, it's really hard to see with these lights.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll watch this side, you watch that side.
Okay.
No.
It depends the job in the studio, to be honest. I've been at some that, like the one I'm currently at, they're really picky about it. They do not let people do crunch. Well, I shouldn't say. They don't stop people if they want to crunch, but they never force it. So, but I've been at studios where, and I've been fairly lucky. The only times I ever had a crunch was on marketing stuff was like E3 and PAX. Like I would do like sometimes 24-hour like stints to try to get a video done or something. But I almost always got flown to those conventions to work the conventions as well, because I like to talk. So they'd throw me in the booths. So I was always like crunching and literally bringing the stuff with me on a hard drive to the con. Whereas like some of the engineers, they'll just work, like they'll stay there in the hotel, like sometimes in there. But that's a lot of times it's on them. But there has been, I've definitely seen some crunches, and it's gotten better for sure. It's talked about all the time when there is a crunch because, you know, everybody wants to, there's no union in the game industry, right? They want one, especially in California, they're working on it, but it doesn't exist. So it can happen, especially engineers and like a lot of the in-game artists too can crunch if things are getting behind. A lot of times that could be due to bad management or just too much was taken, you know, on, or people dropped out. Especially with engineers, if they lose programmers, I mean, it's got to fall on everybody else, right? Because it's actually very hard to get programmers and engineers in the game industry. I've never been in a single studio that wasn't hiring for them.
Yeah,
or desperate for them.
Speaking as somebody who did programming and who does programming, I would say that it is not necessarily true that every studio crunches for the programmers. I do think that there is a drive culturally toward less crunch, and I'm gonna say something a little weird, which is that I think the pandemic has helped with that just a tiny bit, because it used to be when I was at Microsoft, they would sometimes do what they call a hack week, and they would throw us all into a big warehouse and say, "Okay, guys, write code, go," and they would feed us there. So they literally wouldn't let us leave.
We do.
And
we do
it
Hack
was
Week now, actually.
yeah. You guys do Hack Week too as
Yep.
well.
But it's anyone in the studio. We'll do not Hack Week. What we do is we'll do like a hack day or 2 hack days, and it's literally do whatever you want. You can literally make a game if you want to.
Yeah, Shell did that
And a lot
too.
of people get together on our Slack and they'll do like, you know, like a guy's like, well, I want to try doing some art, even though he's like a writer, and he'll do art, and somebody else will do coding, and you know they'll learn from each other and just like make a game in a day, and then everybody plays the game. And they've actually, some of the studios, like the one I've been at, they actually let the guy like release his game and sell it. Like they didn't care, you know, like even though it was on work hours, it was just like they're just. A lot of studios can be very supportive, and then there's also larger studios which might be a little more constrictive about doing outside work or doing work like that. It
Yeah.
just depends where you are. I mean, I'm at a fairly medium-sized studio now and not a huge studio, so they're a lot more comfortable and, you know, just like kind of loose. I mean, we've been literally working at home for the last year and a half, almost 2 years actually. So.
And the thing about the hack weeks is they're fun and they're crunch at the same time. So you kind of get swept up in the energy, and then you're sick for the week after because you worked yourself.
It's kind of self-inflicted crunch though.
Yeah,
it's not a forced thing.
It can tend to be. So I think one of the things about the game industry in particular is that so many people want to get in because they're passionate about the work compared to like boring shit. So if you want to write boring code, you'll probably get paid more and work less than writing super fun, interesting code. And to a certain extent, they will, like the game industry does want a person who is passionate. And there's downsides of that because I found just in life in general, like the more interesting the thing I'm making and doing is, the harder I'm working on it compared to something that's not really all that interesting. Then I'm working less just because it asks less of me and it is simpler.
I will say that because I worked in Hollywood doing compositing for film and TV as well, and I was at Rooster Teeth working on Ruby and Red vs. Blue doing compositing, and the crunch in that industry is so much worse than the game industry from what I've seen. We were pulling 18-hour days, 6 days a week on salary pay at Rooster Teeth, and some 24-hour days just crunching. We were living out of that studio. In fact, they had beds in there, but nobody could use them. They're covered in bed bugs, but they're like they're so gross.
Oh no!
But yeah, like they're just feeding us snacks and like trying to keep us awake. I've never had it that level in the game industry. Any studio, I've been at a lot of studios. But it does exist. I mean, I can't say it doesn't exist. It's definitely gotten better over the last decade or so. And it does happen, and when it does happen, you hear about it.
Yeah, I have a question over here. Yeah.
Like what you're submitting, or like
when you're applying for a job, right? Right.
Well, there's a website. What is the name of that website? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know.
Glassdoor. Glassdoor.
Yeah, Glassdoor.
So
Yeah.
Glassdoor is a place where people submit anonymously, like their complaints about a company. I would check there, but also check the dates on it, because there can be complaints on that company that are from a decade ago, and they may not be relevant anymore. And you can kind of tell the ones that are like the marketing ones where they're trying to give themselves a better look, like where it's like, I love this company. They have amazing hours and blah, blah. It's like this very like scripted thing. And then there's the people that are just blatantly honest, like what they like and don't like. And that is where you look for reviews, in my opinion. You look for the ones that are not always positive, but they're telling you the truth. You can tell they're telling the truth. Glassdoor can be very useful. It can be a little bit negative in a way that you have to kind of read through their comments, because sometimes people are just bitter about something, like maybe somebody took their position, and you can tell because they're just like ranting, about nothing. And if you read through it, you're just like, it doesn't sound like it was that bad. It sounded like he got in a bad situation, but it wasn't the company's fault. This is another employee, which can happen at any place you work. So,
one thing that I would say turns me off in a job description when I read it is that they're trying to make that person wear too many hats. Like, it's kind of not clear what kind of person they're trying to hire. Now, if they're a very small studio, maybe they don't necessarily know what kind of person they're trying to hire, but I would definitely go with a company, even if they're small, that's like, hey, we need a combat coder, right? We need somebody to do X and Y for our game, because that means they know what they need and what they want. But if you see something that's like, I saw a job description that was like, we want somebody to do QA, but also mind our front desk. And I was like, wait, that's 2 jobs, maybe 3. How many QA people do you need? You can't do both of those things. And like, they were like a glorified secretary, but also a QA person. Nuh-uh. Pick a job and stick with it. Even if it's a small company, you need to know that they need to understand who they're trying to hire. And that's why you know if you're going to be a fit for that role too, because otherwise, that's the biggest red flag for me, I think. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I personally, I like to know if I'm going to have to try to relocate, if they allow remote work, if they're going to be upfront and honest about that. I had a friend apply for a job. He said, I'm doing this remote. They're like, yeah, I'm doing this remote. Yeah. They interviewed him, 3 days of interviews, and they said, oh, we need you to move. Well, they lied, straight up. So you have to get honesty about that, because they were ready to hire him, but he did not want to relocate.
And see if they'll pay for a relocation.
Yeah.
A lot of studios will for full-time jobs. They won't for contract ever, so don't expect that. But
yeah,
I could see when you had 2 hands going. Yes. I will say QA is considered entry level at a lot of studios. It's usually one of the lower paying jobs, but it's also one of the less qualifications needed to get in. A lot of people start in QA. Honestly, I recommend people that if people aren't, I should say, don't have a really specific talent, like you're not an amazing animator, or you're not like into this, but you want to work in games and you're like, I play a lot of video games, and you can say, well, I've bug tested this, or I've like gone through these levels and stuff. QA is a good way to get in and see every aspect and figure out where you want to go. So a lot of QA people end up being producers. They'll go on. Sometimes I've seen some go into environmental art or do like world building, because they spend all day in the game. Now, it can be very tedious, because you could literally be like jumping on a mountain for an entire week trying to find a hole, but it is great to see how everything works and see what you actually want to learn. And I've never been in a studio that wasn't like encouraging for QA people to try to move up. So,
question over here. They want you to know how to code, but I make that general jokey answer because the truth is that people ask me a lot, what computer language should I learn? And I'm like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You just have to learn how to code. Because whatever you end up learning, you're going to probably have to learn something new when you're on the job regardless. And what really helps is what they call like your fundamentals, which is like knowing how algorithms work, knowing how networking works, knowing how object-oriented programming works, all of those things. Now, I personally started on, well, I'm gonna date myself a little bit. I did learn C++ in college, tiny bit. I now teach C++, so I never lost it, but I did take a big break from it. I started working on mods for Half-Life. So I learned like mail scripting and like Lua through doing that. Oh, mail scripting is from Maya. I learned that, and I learned Lua, and then I learned a lot of ActionScript because ActionScript at the time working Flash, you were making stuff for phones, and then Apple killed Flash. So not that Apple owned Flash, but Apple decided to stop supporting Flash, which meant that the ActionScript programmers were no longer needed. And then I was also doing Unity. And because I was doing Unity, I was learning C#, and because I was learning C#, I was learning .NET, which is how I got into Microsoft. But it's a very circuitous path. C# is Microsoft's like primary .NET programming language. Now, right now, I'm learning Python because I didn't know Python. So I ended up at Microsoft, and they're like, hey, we want you to write this program in Python. I don't know how to write any Python. Tough. So you may end up having to write a type of code that you are not necessarily proficient in. And what will get you through is having code knowledge, which is to say understanding OOP, understanding how frameworks work and how to incorporate frameworks, and like being a good hacker, like trying to figure out how pieces fit together and how you can improve things and thinking outside the box as well as in, because I can't tell you how many problems I solved by just taking a completely different route from what they originally expected that I would do. So in terms of what coding language, it does not matter.
Just know a coding language, because it may change, and depending what system you're using, Unity, Unreal, I mean, it could totally change, or you could be using proprietary stuff. We were on the Hero engine for 2 of the games I had, and we wrote, like on Elder Scrolls Online, they rewrote 97% of the code of that engine in the first year of the game launching because it sucked. And now it's their own system, and they can do whatever they want, and it's like set up for anything, any expansion they want to do. They were out of console support, they were able to do anything they wanted. But they had the engineers had to crunch down and rewrite the entire code. So, yeah. Indeed so this is weird, but for some reason, a lot of game studios right now are using Indeed. And LinkedIn. That's every studio I've been at, that seems to be the 2 right now that they're focusing on. That seems to change every few years for some reason. Like Monster was really big for a while. But now for some reason, like I know like in Austin, Texas, when I was living there, there's a lot of game studios, and Indeed's headquarters is there. So I think they had like a thing where Indeed would like support them and promote them, and so like all the studios started using it. Then other studios said, hey, everybody's looking at this website, so let's all put our stuff there, LinkedIn also has been becoming a really big thing. So.
LinkedIn is big. LinkedIn, of course, did get bought up by Microsoft, so that's one of the reasons. But
what doesn't?
Yeah, what doesn't? But Gamma Sutra was the website for finding game developer jobs for a really long time. I think they are rebranding, although it's kind of a struggle because, yeah, it's like everybody's used to calling it Gamma Sutra, even though it's kind of a weird name. And I think they rebranded like Game Developer or something like that, but I think they're still Gamma Sutra. So always check their boards because they have tons of job postings, tons of job openings. And that's the one that I would recommend. Also, if you want to really like break in, you kind of have to go to conferences. This is a good one, but this is a starter. The big one is GDC. E3 is also good. E3 I found to be a little bit less beneficial because it's very press heavy. Yeah, E3 honestly is a little bit overrated. Unless you're just like a big enthusiast and you want to like ask press questions. GDC is the best networking event. It's also the most expensive. I don't know that they've held it in person.
They have student discounts.
They do have student discounts. Yeah, they do have student discounts. If you get a student badge, you get access to some talks, but you get access to the expo and all the interviewing and portfolio reviews, which is the real reason that you're there as a student. And just the weird thing about GDC is like you can run into the most famous people. And like the people that you really look up to, and they'll just be there.
It's very tech heavy compared to like say E3, which is a showroom, basically. And then like PAX is all about people playing games more than talking about developing
But there
them.
is PAX Dev.
There
and
is,
PAX
yes.
Dev is a good networking opportunity as well. I've met some really good people at PAX Dev. So that's
Yeah.
another one that you can go to as a student. Way in the back, there's a question.
It's not required, I would say, because you're probably never going to touch it. The only time is maybe in cinematic design, if you're doing like animations that are going to, like, animators sometimes have to put it into the code. But honestly, most of the time you're going to learn the bare minimum of code you need while you're on the job for whatever engine it is. So it's, yeah, not really necessary. All they care about is you're real.
Yeah, I'd second that. If you're a pure artist, you don't necessarily need to learn the tech side. There is a role called technical artist, and that was the way that I was always leaning, where I was doing the rigging. I like to do the rigging and animation for characters, and then is more of a tech role. You do have to know like the art fundamentals of how to animate, but you also have to know the tech fundamentals of how to rig, which is like a bit more of a hybrid tech art role. But on the pure art side, there's definitely jobs, especially in concept art, and especially in like character design, which like is total weakness of mine. Like I use somebody else for that.
What type of position are you looking for? What type of art? Like environmental artist or like a world builder? Like you're talking about like actually designing like concept art or? Okay, yeah, I mean, in any art field, every artist I've ever hired, it's all portfolio, 100%. There is very little studios at this point that care what your degree is in, honestly. You could have the most amazing reel and you have your GED, and it doesn't matter compared to the Harvard graduate if their reel sucks. So it used to be more of a big deal. There's still a few holdouts here and there where you got the old school person that doesn't quite know anything about art, and so they don't do it. But honestly, they usually make the heads of the art departments and stuff do the interviews, or somebody who's an artist. And trust me, all they care about is talent. They don't care about anything else.
They care about your talent. In fact, I always tell this story to my current students because I want to emphasize, like, it took me a while to break into doing games. I've noodled around. I did web design, blah, blah, blah. And part of it was because when I was an undergrad in school, and again, I have a degree in 3D animation, I was really focused on my classwork and getting A's in the classes. And that was actually stupid of me, and I should have focused on my portfolio instead. Mm-hmm. If you coast, there was another student in my same class who was always coasting. He was getting C's in all his classes. And I was like, you are not paying attention to what teachers telling you. But he spent all of his off hours in the computer lab making a banging portfolio that absolutely rocked, and he got hired at Square right out the gate, right out of school. They did not look at his GPA. They did not look at his grades. They looked at the portfolio he made, and it was amazing. Mine wasn't as good. And I had the wrong approach. And all the learnings that I took, I went to grad school. When I was in grad school, I was like, okay, now I understand why I'm actually here. I'm here to actually make shit. I don't care about the grades as much. I don't want to pass. I don't want to waste my money, but I want to make something cool so that I can go to employers and say, hey, look at the scheme I coded. And that is what makes the difference, the thing that you make outside of your schoolwork. So if you're a student, don't completely neglect your schoolwork, especially if you're on scholarship, whatever. But even the students that I teach in my class, I'm like, listen, this is an assignment, do it, whatever. I have to make you do it because I have to grade you. But if you want to get a job, you want to make a passion project, because that's what they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you, what did you make for you and how good is it?
Oh, and for concept art specifically too, you want to diversify that a lot. You want like a city, you want like middle of nowhere. I mean, you got to think of like, they're going to look and see what your range is first. They want to see what your range is. They don't want somebody who's, like say just drawing unicorns, right? They don't want like somebody who could do anything. They want you to draw animals. They want you to draw like, if you're doing like character art, it'd be more humans. They're going to look at it, and they're going to look at your spacing and your placement, because you got to think of it right off the bat as it's a game, right? So you could draw a super pretty picture of a castle or something, right? But if there's no way up to the castle, they're gonna be like, hey, there's no way up to the castle. Like, you couldn't play this if we built this as a level, right? So you gotta think of it that way. You gotta think of, how would the player get around this environment? It can look super pretty because they never look exactly like the concept art, right? But it's still got to be functional. So, yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations. You sound like me, honestly. I have my master's degree is in digital media as well, and I did my master's thesis on Dungeons and Dragons, like literally, which was really fun and really cool. I basically just talked about like game mechanics and AI and like different implementations that you could do with AI, blah blah blah. So yeah, you can totally get a role, but what you have to figure out like what job you want and just shoot for it. Because like I said, I did a lot of random stuff and I ended up in community, you know, and that was a good home for me, like as a community manager. If you're looking for like mechanics design and that kind of stuff, there's totally roles. You just have to put yourself that. But the thing is, like when you're first starting out, you're not really proven. So it helps to have like some kind of interactive project you can show people that proves your theory idea. And what helped me was that I had made games. And I had literally made like even really simple, but just like, hey, this is a dumb little shooter that I made, and this shows that I know how to code, in addition to these other bona fides that I have. Or, hey, this is a mod that I made, and it shows I know how to animate, because I did all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it can vary. I mean, like the game industry, it can be really hard to get into, and it's hard to find those jobs sometimes, and they go fast. And I've never honestly seen any company I've been at where we didn't get like 1,000 applications, where 900 of them had absolutely no experience whatsoever. They just wanted to work at the company. I mean, like I was doing web design before I got into video, and I probably applied over 100 times to companies. You know, like I was applying, I was like, I had all the skills. You know, I could do everything from coding to graphics. Was not getting the jobs. I made a stupid dance machinima video in Star Wars Galaxies with MC Chris called Fet's Vet. And 4 years later, I applied to BioWare, and the Sony execs that worked on Galaxies were the founders of BioWare Austin, and they knew who I was, and I got hired at my interview, like straight in the door, for some passion project I made that was really stupid. You know, like, I mean, it was because of that. They literally hired me on the work, not on anything else, you know. And I went to school for 3D animation just like you did, and I haven't touched 3D since. So
yeah, and it's gonna be a project of some kind. It's not gonna be your writing, because ain't nobody gonna be reading your master's thesis. Now, people did read mine only to cite it. I mean, I've been cited a handful of times, but it's not the kind of, like, academia, and as somebody who is an academic now and who was an academic before and has been in the industry, they don't really talk to each other very much. And in fact, if you go to like the game academic conferences, a handful of industry people are going to be there. Jesse Schell, who mentored me, I was very grateful for that. You know, he is also a CMU professor, so there's some crossover there between academia and game development. But a lot of times with the academia, you're looking at serious games. You're looking at games for education and training. And in that way, you can definitely get a leg up into games, because a lot of people doing serious games will be interested in your academic work. And that's the kind of role that I would maybe consider if you were like coming straight out with a master's degree and you wrote this paper. But I would also say, like, try to partner up with somebody and make a project, because that is going to make you shine more than any writing will.
Yeah. This is just a personal thing, I feel. Don't go to your interview in a suit if you get an interview. The game industry does not run like that. Do not go in sandals, mind you, because then they think you're too lazy. The standard is nice jeans and either a t-shirt or a button-down, but the game industry is very picky about judging your character more than anything. We've hired people that had way less talent than another person just because we thought they'd fit on our team. Because we're like, we can hang out with this person, you know, we can get a beer with this guy, you know, like he doesn't have as much talent, but we know we can teach him, you know, and that's really important, especially on the smaller studios. They're going to care more the fact that they can get along with you than they are your talent. You still need the talent to get in the door to at least get the initial interview, but like, be yourself, you know. You're not applying for some corporate job. It is the game industry, right? I mean, we have kegs of beer on tap half the time. Like we had our art director at BioWare, Jeff Dobson. He sat in a lazy boy every day. That was his work chair. Like he brought a lazy boy in the office and he sat. I mean, this is the kind of people we're talking about in the industry, right? Like so, especially on the art side, they don't care about theses. Like they skim your resume, right? Keep it simple. It's they're looking for talent, but they're looking for people they can get along with, to be honest, and that's more important. So I'm not saying be unprofessional. Don't be unprofessional, but like. Relate to them. They are your same people, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, good. Perfect.
What type of work do you do specifically? Do you coding or do you like art? Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, well, obviously as an art director, you're going to have to work with other people. I mean, but I will warn you, like jobs like art director means you're not going to be doing any art, like at a studio. I mean, my current boss, he wants to do projects all the time, and he keeps volunteering his free time to work on like video projects and stuff like that and in-game cinematics, and he's a 3D guy. But he took the job because it paid better. He wanted the upgrade, and I don't blame him. But you got to remember, you are now just paper pushing and managing other people's time when you go up to those positions. So you got to be ready for that. Like I make sure I don't go any higher than senior at this point because I still want to do the art side of it. I like creating, and I know if I'm just managing books, I'm gonna hate it. I'm gonna go right back down, and it's not uncommon to see people do that too, step down from a position just because they want to get back into actually doing the work. Yeah, I mean, some people are really good at it, and if you're really good at managing people and you enjoy it, it could be great. It could be an excellent job. It'll pay more, especially, which is great.
You asked about game jams. I think game jams are great for either building a portfolio piece or building like a proof of concept. Most of the things that I've finished have been game jam games, to be honest, and then maybe I just polished them a little bit more. Or maybe, but what I really like is that sense of having like a deadline or a competition to work toward. It really helps me to focus on what I'm actually doing. But there's games that are out there that were game jam games that have gone on to be produced as full titles. So if you make a game jam game and you like it, you can keep working on it until you think it's great, or you can throw it away because it's something that you made quickly. You don't have to worry about it. And either way, it's a portfolio piece for you to say like, hey, this is the shit I made. So I don't think there's any. The only thing that makes me worry about game jams is just the crunch mentality, because you can really burn yourself out if you do too much of that stuff. And so you have to have a pretty good balance, I think, in life. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
As a solo developer, standout art is going to mean a lot more than standout code. Code is just there. I see so many games out there that are just like art from the asset store, and it doesn't grab. I tell students when they're getting started, sure, use the asset store, cool. But if you actually wanted people to notice your thing, it's got to pop right away to the eyes. It's got to be the eye candy and the sound. Those are the two, like having good music. Ugh. The guy who did Thomas Was Alone, Mike Bithell, he did a talk, and he's not a very good coder or artist, he says. But he made this game in Unity, and all the characters are squares. Have you seen Thomas Was Alone? They're all blocks. But he actually did a very good job and sold the game very well because he hired a professional voiceover guy to do the voiceover and make the story pop because of the voiceover. And that was enough to make that game really stand out, even though the art was very simple and the code was very simple. So if you have simple art, simple code, but great sound, you might be in a good place. And of course, a good story helps too there, but you need to get people visually on the game as soon as possible. So if you're concerned that your code's not as tight, I mean, this is another thing I tell students, VVVVVV is open source. It is on GitHub. If you haven't played VVVVVV, it is a Commodore 64 style jumping game with like a 2-button jumper. You flip gravity, that's all you do. It's open source, and the code is mediocre. I'm not the best coder in the world either. Even though I teach coding, I'm still very much learning coding, because coding is one of those things you learn your whole life. But it's really, really inspirational that it is out there, that you can look at it and you can understand how it's put together and be like, I could do this.
Especially contract or remote.
And I'm not dissing the VVVVV guy. He'd be the first person to say that the code is, it's all one long switch case statement. It's amazing. Yeah. People out there groaning. Yeah, it's amazing. Totally check it out. It's totally awesome.
Well, I had a friend he was one of the higher ups in art at BioWare, and he was like just miserable being like in charge, and he just like wanted to draw, and he was like, I'm gonna break out and make my own indie game, but I don't know coding. So he was like asking all his friends, who's a coder, who knows something. They've formed a small 3-person team, and they started Stoic Studios, and they made Banner Saga. And then, of course, that did very well, so they made Banner Saga 2 and Banner Saga 3. And now, I don't know if they're like 6 people or more at this point because they went remote, so I don't know how many people they had. But they were like in a shed in the back of a barn. And like there was like a bar, and then like barn, and then they were in a shed that was like 6 foot tall. And that's where they were working before everything went remote. And made Banner Saga 1. And he just wanted to make something with art. So he hired one guy who was a writer, and he hired another guy who was a programmer. I shouldn't say hired. None of them were making any money. They all invested their own money into it, and then when it sold, they made the money. But they all like saved up. A lot of them were working at BioWare and stuff. They saved their money and then quit, and then did this for like a year and a half, I think it was, and then released their game, and it was successful. So, I mean, it happens, right? It happens. He was like, I'm not gonna learn to code. Like I'm gonna find somebody who does it correct. Yeah. So, I think small teams can be very strong. Once you learn that you can work with each other. So, did you have another question? Oh, it's good.
All good. No.
It's more of has my time diminished?
Yeah.
Yes, my time has diminished a lot. I used to be a hardcore MMO player. I played everything from Ultima Online up. Now it's like maybe I can get an hour or 2 in a week, so I've kind of gone into playing games like Stardew Valley or something where I can pick up and play and drop, quickly. And then I also do streaming, so like when I play games, I want to play something casual because I've been working all day. I think I've seen other stories where my wife actually worked at Blizzard, and she was working in billing and sales, and she was a hardcore WoW player, 80 hours a week. It was her first MMO. She was obsessed, and then she got the job at Blizzard, and she just quit all gaming after that. She'd come home crying, but people, cursing her out and death threats every day. It was brutal because people were mad about their money. So you got the people mad about their money that are owed something, that's the thing. And she was probably in one of the worst departments for that, And so I've seen it where people work in games and they stop playing games. But yeah, I've actually worked with very few people, but I've worked with a few people that don't like games that work in games, and they were actually engineers, ironically enough.
Yeah.
But.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in my experience, studios have gotten way more open to remote work over the pandemic. In my like assembly experience, as when I was at Microsoft, and I did quit just shortly before the pandemic, just coincidentally. But when and the people that I still talk to that have worked there, there was really like a big airplane commuting culture almost, like, and that my team was weird and unique because I was a drop-in person, so I basically would go to a studio and like help them with something, and then I'd go to a different studio and help them with some other thing. So I didn't work on like any one individual project, so I would just be buzzing all over the place. Now it's very remote. They don't fly you places all the time anymore, which is probably really good for the people that were really burned out on travel. But I think just in general, like, yes, studios have definitely become more willing to hire remote workers, and I see this as such a positive change because a lot of times with these contractors, especially, they relocate you for 3 months to do a contract. One of my jobs was a contract job, and I just had to move for a year. Like it just is.
I went out for 2 weeks to San Francisco to work on Marvel Heroes Online.
Oh yeah.
It was a 2-week thing. Just like they paid for the hotel and everything and the flight,
right.
though,
They pay
which
for
is
it.
nice. They'll pay for it, but I'll be honest. I don't find them. In most game studios, you won't find them skimping on things like that. It's just known that you have to do it. But like my studio now, I started at it at the beginning of 2020, right? Was that COVID started in 2020?
I think so, yeah.
I was there 1 month, and then COVID hit, and we all started working remote. And all those jobs that they say you couldn't do from home, they realized, oh, everybody could do their job from home.
Now, I do see a lot of job postings that are like, remote for now until COVID is over. And I don't know if they're going to turn their leaf on that or not.
They actually have at the point now where the studio is open if people want to come in. So they're like, they did a survey, and 3/4 of the studio said they wanted to stay working remote. You know, like they will come in for a meeting once a week or something, you know, just to like meet and hang out or get a beer after work. But like majority of people just love to be able to do their laundry and take naps and, you know, like stay home and, you know, not spend money,
Not
eat their
have
own
to
food.
eat out. Yeah.
And it saves the studio a lot of money because most game studios provide snacks and drinks and
we were often
stuff.
working out of a WeWork, and I'm so glad to see less of that because
Yeah.
the WeWork culture was really toxic.
There's
in my opinion.
very little jobs in the game industry that can't be done remote at this point. There's mostly just like people that work on the computers themselves or the servers that have to be there. You know, I mean, IT guys, if there's specifics. But I mean, even they only have to come in occasionally at this point, you know, because they can still remote in for 90% of the stuff, and they only have to come in if they're shipping out. I mean, like even my studio, they Amazon us stuff like, oh, you need a Cintiq. Okay, it'll be there later today. You know, we're going to order it on Amazon. You know, like it's like that nowadays. So everything can be done digitally, you know, so a lot of Slack calls.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I deal with IT a lot because I'm considered a power user. That's literally the title they gave me, because I do video work, and so it's very heavy. Like I do everything from filming the game and stuff. So like I have to be able to run Unity at 4K, right? And the game is not made for 4K. So like I'm filming everything at high res for future use, and so like they usually have pretty open. I mean, most IT guys have their own credit card, or at least somebody in the team does. But there can be a lot of red tape depending on the company. And the IT guys can be pretty swamped, or like small staffed. At Bioware, we had 500 people, and we had, I think at the peak, 3 IT guys. And you could never find them. Like they were always somewhere fixing somebody's desk, or, you know, like people would have to put tickets in, and that ticket queue could be ridiculous. But I'm at a studio now, and when I started, you know, we had 56 people, and we had 3 IT guys. And honestly, I think they're probably bored some of the time. So, like, I mean, like, it just depends where you are. I mean, every studio's run differently, to be honest. There's not a rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes they just have budget for IT, and sometimes they don't. But the IT guys, you know, are very needed all the time. So, yeah.
It's time to jump up in the air. Jump up, don't be scared. Jump up and your cares will soar away. And if the dark clouds start to swirl, don't feel a shed a tear, 'cause I'll be your one-up girl. So let's all jump up super high, high up in the sky. There's no power up like dancing. You know that you're my superstar.
Yeah, it's funny because it'll suddenly magically occur to them that they're saving a lot of money by not flying you around everywhere. Oh, weird.
I just wish I would have invested in Zoom.
Yeah,
Like,
right?
man, bank right now.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, speaking of my personally, because I was teaching now, I feel like I work the same. The only difference is that now I'm back in the classroom and they make me drive a commute, and I didn't have to drive a commute when I was teaching from home on Zoom, so it was less work for sure, working from home than but in the studio stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the one nice thing is like when I'm doing like everything, when I'm doing specifically video stuff, like I want to be heads down into it, right? Like and just get things done. When I was in studio, it was actually harder because most of the time I'd be in the marketing department, which would mean I wouldn't always have my own room, you know. And it's easier to be a video editor and just do it out loud in a big room with no soundproofing. And that just isn't there for most game studios. Most game studios don't have a marketing team on-house. They contract it out, so it's more new. And so like I was just dealing with people having conversations over my head, you know, like left and right. You know, like it was just all over the place and busy and getting called into meetings that I needed to be in. You know, like it's, I feel like we've been very productive in the last year. And it's been, you can notice it. The game's doing twice as good. You know,
I get way more work done working from home when I was working on technical projects. And it's not more time invested necessarily, it's just that the time is invested better.
I feel like I invested less time working and got more done.
I absolutely agree. Because even if, like, a lot of times when you're working, like, in a studio environment, first of all, almost every office over the past 10 years has been an open office plan, and it sucks because you have no privacy and you got to have your headphones on. And that's why I hate WeWork so much. Oh, you're in a fishbowl. There's literally a glass wall. And people can walk by and poke at you while you're trying to write code. I hate it. Whereas if I'm in my own home office with my door shut and my own coffee in front of me, I can get so much more work done. It's so much quieter. It's so much more peaceful. I just put on whatever music I want.
My current office literally has glass walls. The studio
Yeah,
literally has glass walls.
Yeah, that's how WeWork is too. It's literally glass walls. So people can like walk by.
It feels
and look at you.
open, but
I
at the same time,
don't
it's harder to get work done. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say working from home is definitely better. Yeah.
The biggest. I have lots of games that got canned that I've worked on. As long as the game went public, you can talk about it, you know? I would say just because it got negative, I have friends who worked on Fallout 76 and that game got a lot of negative, right? I have friends that worked on Mass Effect Andromeda, right? Like they worked on that and they still put it on the reels. And I honestly don't feel that other studios judge you for that game.
Nah.
Because they know how it works. There's a lot of bureaucracy sometimes. It's a big company, especially those ones, you know, like it, and it doesn't fall on one person when something fails. And you could have a bunch of people passionately working on a project and it just doesn't hit the market at the right time, you know, it bombs. Like you release a game in December, which they consider the death month for games because everyone's already bought their Christmas gifts. And it could bomb, like right off the bat. And it could be the best game ever, or it came out against like a Gears of War or something big, right? Like it just worked out that the market has moved on by the time you shipped a game you've been working on for 5 years, you know? Like it's not uncommon and you should never be, you know, ashamed of a game you worked on.
It's still your work. You still put it on your resume. You still put your good stuff on your reel. Even if the game got critically panned, if you're proud of the work you did, show it.
Yeah, and they're not, trust me, nobody is going to be judging you on it at the other studios. They know, because they know how much work goes into these things, right? Good or bad when they come out. They're just, you know, as long as your work looks good, that's all they care about.
And I hear 76 is good now.
Well.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, for like 5 people playing it.
He loves it. He loves it.
I'm just kidding. I actually like the game. I actually played it when it came out and I enjoyed it, but I'm easy to please, I guess. So, yeah. Was there another question? I could have sworn I saw another hand, or maybe I was just seeing glares. My eyes are watering at this point.
I think we're out of time, possibly. We got the 5-minute warning a few minutes ago.
1 minute,
so, yeah. Well, yeah, what do you know? So, everybody, thank you for coming out today. I've got Discord, I've got social media if you want to
sorry I didn't have any time to put them on a slide.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's all good. But thank you guys so much.
It was very last minute, buddy. Oh, I have another panel, 6 p.m. That's a Q&A in here. It's about anything. So if you guys have more questions too, feel free. You can hit me up in the hallway too or whatever. But yeah, that's going to be a Q&A about anything, game industry, movie industry, all the different things I've worked on. So feel free to swing by. So
Thanks for having me.
yeah, anytime.
All right, great.